I just want to go across to our dashboard and show you how the markets have fared in the build-up to the budget. As I welcome Rashesh Shah. Rashesh bhai, one of the things that's been spoken of in the economic survey is to try and clamp down on the gambling instincts that we are seeing a lot of young traders exhibit in the futures and options segment. Now, we've seen the SEBI chairperson, we've seen RBI, they're all talking about this. How do you see Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman dealing with this growing clamor of trying to reduce speculative trading in futures and options? Do you think it's some place where the government should try and intervene, because the markets have been on a very strong growth trajectory? Should they intervene by imposing security transaction tax on FNOs, increasing it, or do you think just let things be the way they are, let people learn their own lessons?
No, I think from what we've been hearing, seeing and also experiencing, I think we should expect some action, especially on options. I think the government has 2 or 3 things they can do. They might increase STT on options, the security transaction tax, because there is a lot of retail trading in options that is going on, which is not helping with capital formation, which is obviously is helping volumes in the stock market, but not helping with the ultimate objective of creating jobs and capital formation and all that. So I would expect that at least on the option side, there'll be some things government will do, maybe increase the STT on option trading. One of the other things they might do, Rahul, is that they might call any profits and on the FNO segment as speculative profit and not also allow it as business income. And that will be a fairly big, So
if that happens, what impact do you expect on the markets if these security transaction tax were introduced on option trading?
I think then overall volumes will come down, the profitability come down. I think some amount of gambling will always remain, because I think there are a lot of people who love to just buy an option in the morning and see by evening whether it's in the money or not. Some amount of that is part of FNO, but I think increasing the STT on options trading will bring down the volumes on option trading, especially this intraday. So there could be STT on intraday options, which will be even. So if you're buying and selling option in the same day, they might curb that also. They might increase or they might change the tax classification for FNO. I think it might become speculative income rather than business income. And that will also have a fairly big impact on the volumes and the activity that is going on.
Mr. Kambada, one of the big concerns is about what the government should do to try and boost consumption. I want to show our viewers some consumption data markers and then try and get your sense of what can potentially be done. Here we are looking at the year-on-year increase in private consumption expenditure, which grew in financial year 24 at 4%, down from 6.8% the previous year and down from 11.7% growth in financial year 22. So consumption expenditure has been a critical concern that's been voiced multiple times in the build-up to the budget. And I'll show you FMCG sales as well. And if you look at the year-on-year change in food and agro-based product sales, these are consumer goods, it's at 8.3%. In FY22, the growth was 21.2%. So, how are you looking at the consumer demand story? What do you think the government can and ought to do in this budget to try and spur demand?
Thanks, Rahul. In my mind, the economic survey has been a good starting point for the budget, and it has talked of the rural potential. And I still believe that India's real story lies in the rural areas and the small towns. And I think the budget has to now ensure that that power of the small towns and rural area are unleashed in some way. And I believe the economic survey also prescribes something for industry, that how we need to lead responsible growth. Now, when I say, you will say my question is consumption, and that's where I'm coming in, that, for example, we need special packs which are very well priced, so that the people in rural India look at economy in a very big way in their consumption. So how we can also help with special packets, with special programs to ensure that the rural demand is boosted. Secondly, I think a lot of money needs to flow into agriculture infrastructure, and that piece. If that happens, and just imagine if we get more cash in the hands of this folk, they will buy more. So we definitely now need some more cash in their hands, and I think these direct transfers are, really helping, and how we can make it up. I also believe, honestly, that if we are really looking at an India of really as a global powerhouse, we can look at India as a make in India for exports, especially of food processed products, where I'm coming from. And you will say how that will increase consumption. In my mind, see, when you become big in exports in anything, the prices come down. And if prices come down, consumption increases. And that is, I think, the need of the hour. Second, a lot of things goes waste. For example, onions go waste, tomato goes waste, and sometimes they are very, very costly. By processed food, we can bring the cost lower, so once again consumption can increase. Third piece, I somehow believe, you'll say this is not part of the budget, but I still believe that the indirect taxes actually add to the pricing, and that actually impairs growth. So to have reasonable indirect taxes, when I say indirect taxes means GST, to ensure that the taxes are reasonable so that growth is really helped, is also one major story. Second, I somehow believe that our main problem in the rural areas which can really help is infrastructure. We need to put in a lot of money. For example, of course, the government is making airports and then making big roads. I somehow believe we need to make cold chains. And I believe with this budget, I am definitely going to see much more money being put in this arena, especially cold chains, pack houses. I believe for food security, we need a modern storage facility so that, for example, when there is anything and any calamity, we can bank on that. And I think that
so
is
you
the need of
mentioned
the hour.
exports
So
and
I do
imports. I want to take our viewers through
Agreed,
the
sir.
data for exports and imports and then throw it open to our guests and talk to them about it. I'll start with exports, which, the economic survey talks about the kind of headwinds to global trade that are being witnessed. I'm looking at total exports at this moment. They grew to a record 776.5 billion in FY23, went up to 778 billion in FY24, and we only have figures for the first 2 months of this year. But basically, not really growing in the way the government would have wanted. From 676 to 776 was a big growth, and there was a lot of excitement around that increase. After that, it became a flat line. Rajiv Kumar, the economic survey talks about how India's growth is happening at a time very different from South Korea, Japan, China, which grew at a time of globalization, when open trade was the flavor of the moment. Now there is nationalism, protectionism, tariffs are being imposed, which in some ways impacts India's overall growth and also our ability to export.
Yeah, Rahul, but you must notice that our service exports are growing at 14.6%.
And IT service exports are now imperiled because of artificial intelligence. The economic survey talks about that they, over a medium term to long term, they could be in jeopardy.
They are imperiled, but has it affected us? Because even our GCCs, the global capacity centers that we've got, are increasing in their number. They're expected to go up to about 2,400 or so. So I'm pointing this out to say that despite all that out there, the bad global condition, our service exports have managed to continue with their growth. It is the merchandise exports which have actually not done well.
So
at all.
I have the goods exports as well, so I can break this
that's
down
that's the
for you. So if you look at goods exports, good exports
there you go.
Actually came down from 451 billion to 437 billion in financial year 24. So they've actually come down.
There has been no growth at all in merchandise exports.
Whereas if you look at service exports have largely been an upward trajectory from 254 billion in financial year 22 going up to 325 billion and then upwards to 341 billion. So service exports are growing, merchandise exports
and
actually
that's the one to look at, that's the one to go after. We have to increase our share in the world trade of merchandise export. Economic survey, I understandably enough, does not talk about the overall merchandise export.
But there's been a pushback from a lot of columnists saying that India must not keep increasing tariffs. The only way to actually increase exports is if India becomes a part of the global supply chain. By increasing tariffs, you're restricting whatever production happens in India to the Indian domestic market, and you'll never become the China plus one that in your speeches you say you want to.
I think all budgets do work on some inverted duty problems in a particular sector or industry. But I think by and large, the aim has been how do you counter Chinese overcapacity, Chinese mercantilism. On the other hand, India is trying to sign free trade agreements with Western countries, with UK FTA talk is going on. We had a deal with the Gulf countries. We had a deal with Australia. So it's not like there has been protectionism across geographies. It is trying to be as focused on China as possible, which is why we did not join RCEP. So the aim is not tariffs per se. Aim is how do you counter Chinese investment. And what we were discussing earlier, even Donald Trump and Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris had that discussion. So Donald Trump said, I'm okay with Chinese plants being made in the US, so long as they're made in the US, they hire American jobs, American employees, they pay taxes here, profits are shared here. I think it's fine if Chinese invest in India so long as they're a minority or a junior partner in a JV.
Punita Sinha, do you see this mindset changing? Because when, for example, Chinese EV maker BYD wanted to come into India, it wasn't allowed to go through. They were coming in with mega engineering and that plan was scuttled. Now the economic survey says allow for Chinese capital to come and invest in India so that our trade imbalance doesn't keep increasing.
No, I think it's almost a necessity to have a little bit more openness towards China because it will also reduce some inflation pressure.
That's an economic necessity. Then there are political compulsions.
Right, but and the political compulsions, the tone will also change depending on who wins the US election. Because if it is Trump who leads, the tone towards protectionism, the tone towards trade policies globally will be set differently than if it is a democratic government. And that tone will also ripple into India-China relationships on trade and other countries as well. So protectionism could be a little bit more, but right now, as I said, it is a necessity. The consumers are really benefiting from cheaper Chinese imports.
But if I may ask, you see, in this government in the last 10 years, they've been reluctant even to get into certain regional alliances. Look at RCEP. Surely this, it's predates again what will happen a few months from now. There's been a trend toward this kind of protectionism, nationalism, which actually doesn't work. It's at cross purposes with what you want to achieve. The economic survey says exactly the opposite of what this government has been doing over the last several years. Why didn't we get into regional trade alliances when the rest of the world was pushing hard? We still are struggling even with our trade treaty with the United Kingdom. It's been going on for a couple of years. There seems to be a reluctance to go the extra mile. I
think on RCEP it was and remains very China dominated. So the aim was to try to do FTAs. We've done one with Australia, we've done one with UAE. We are, as you said, discussing one with the UK, with the EU and US is next. With China, if you do an RCEP agreement, you get deindustrialized. So the point remains, it's not black or white. Same with allowing Chinese investment, so long as again it remains a minority investor as part of a JV, then there is no harm because you have control over the factory, you have some IP transfer, you have some profit sharing. It's not 0 or 100.
But the Chinese will then have options in other parts of the world.
But they can't miss out the Indian market as well. We are also a very large market.
See, Rajdeep, I think we should recognize the basic facts. Number one, the global trade as a whole is not increasing any longer. This has been said here. The capacities have been installed all over the world. There is population decline, etc. now, etc. No, that's very small.
In
1 to 2%. Merchandise and services are separate. Growing, but that's 2, 3, 4% together also. That's number one. Second, most of the trade now is regionalized. There is a China-Russia bloc, there is a US kind of bloc, there is a European bloc. And inter-bloc or South Asia bloc. If you don't become part of any bloc, then you have no future in growing export. You can't, for domestic demand, you don't export. That's a very different kind of thing. So if you want to have actually fortunately for us, in services we had two good breaks. Number one, on IT, we had a massive advantage and we took it. And for last couple of years, this GCCs, where the global companies are setting up because we have services advantage. But we should look for something next in the service.
But, we have an
education, health, travel, etc. So if we continue as what we are doing, we don't have any great future.
Let me just come in here. One, on China. There was a long period where we kept the politics and economics separate. And I don't see why we can't do that again.
No, because China changed that. China, by coming to the line of actual control, deploying their troops, violating old agreements.
So enjoy. So you hold him
from May 2020. No, they ingressed into... I am only quoting back what the Raksha Mantri or the External Affairs Minister, the Indian government has publicly taken positions that till the time status quo is restored, it cannot be business as normal with China. You can't suddenly wake up one day and say economic compulsions make us change our political positions.
Bigger business. Your imports from China have grown in last 3 years. You said something.
That's been growing, which shows the limitations of our China trade policies. That's correct.
saying is not necessarily translating into action.
See, a lot of the Chinese imports are also capital goods and intermediate goods, which are required for our exports. So we are not trying to import finished goods from China anymore, but we are happy to industrialize using their capital goods and to some extent intermediate goods.